I'd like to welcome everyone to today's edition of the Belonging series, hosted by Imperial as one. It's our candid interview series exploring the BAME experience. And today we're in the privileged position of having one of the instrumental individuals who helped to set up Imperial as one 15 years ago this week. The planning was before that, but we have with us Rudy Page. And Rudy Page, as he says, is a transformational specialist and a skilled facilitator in multi-sector and a multiple sector track record of establishing change, basically. So today we're going to have a frank discussion with Rudy to explore some of the things which he's done, and from there just find out a sense of what's helped him to feel as though he belongs, especially within the different environments which he's been in. So I'm going to welcome Rudy now to our session. Rudy, it's good to see you.
Great to catch up again, Wayne, and thank you very much for the invitation today.
That's brilliant. Rudy, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself? What is it that you do? And then we'll go on to some of the things which you've done for Imperial as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Wayne. So by background, my mother came from Montserrat, my father Jamaica, and I was born here in London. I should be an Arsenal supporter because we used to live in Finsbury Park, but we moved down to Slough and I saw the wondrous skills of George Best and have been a Manchester United fan ever since.
Fair enough.
Okay. Right. And yeah, I love football and I'm a highly competitive person. And I think I got that from the discipline, team sport and individual high performance from football. But I'm a policy implementation specialist in terms of the area of management consulting. And I've been involved in that for the last 20 odd years. But 40 years ago, in my 20s, giving away my age, I worked for Dyke and Dryden, which at the time was the largest Caribbean-owned business in Europe, importing hair products from America. So I started as a salesman, selling all around the country on their behalf. Then I moved up to become sales and marketing manager. And I won a trip to Atlanta because I was the #1 salesperson in Europe. And the company paid all my expenses. I went to the Bronner Brothers show, which was the largest black hair care show in the world at the time, and said that we want one of those shows established here in the UK. When I came back, I established a show called Afro Hair and Beauty.
Oh, yeah.
Most people will know. So I coined those 3 words, Afro Hair and Beauty. And, you know, and at the time, Dyke and Dryden, we were the pivotal company at the time in the industry because we were the largest provider of trade credit to Caribbean-owned businesses in the country. So it had a significant input. And we used to do a lot of social action activities, visiting Bernard's homes and schools, talking about hair care, taking care of young people in terms of who were in the children's homes. So I've always had that, the importance of business, but also social action. They go together because it's about humanity and helping those who don't have, you know, what you have. So that was instilled in me in my early 20s by Len Dyke, Dudley Dryden and Tony Wade. And again, they were all from the Caribbean. So that's my business background. I then went on to establish another show in the industry called HairX, again, which is the 2 biggest shows in the 1980s in this country. I was behind those. And we actually brought that HairX show back again last year in Birmingham with my business partner, Derek Clements. We own a hair products range for natural hair called Sheer Moist 9, which is one of the top brands in the industry. But also we train young people in hair care and barbering because Derek worked for Splinters. So we're about the same age. So Splinters International, not only the top salon for its time and all the top stars there, but it was also one of the, it is the foremost businesses in terms of training young people, giving them the skills that they need to go out into the world, and they were encouraged to become entrepreneurs. So that model, we carry that legacy, and we do a lot of work talking schools as well, young people. We speak to universities where people are putting on their events. We go and speak. And our whole business model is about that self-reliance and collaboration, working as a cluster. And then I spent a few years in Business Link. So in terms of, I moved from sales and marketing into consulting. So, and I've been able to combine sales and marketing skills with consulting. So just before I began as a management consultant, I was responsible for the marketing of Harlesden Town Centre for 18 months,
Right.
part of the regeneration. So I was able to bring in the use of culture, business, community, and the importance of a town centre, the importance of it being a stage for young people and the culture and the local community. Also the importance of business, appreciating that if that town centre is a place of culture and fun, then the clients and the local community will support the centre. So we were able to convince the businesses to support this, and we did. You know, if you remember the Choice FM radio station years ago. So we broadcast live. We were one of the first town centres to broadcast live in the town centre. And then I did a similar thing with the Northwest London College, the Adult Learners Week. We broadcast live from there. So we're able to give entertainment, but also you're delivering learning at the same time. So I've always linked commerce, culture, learning, skills, acquisition, local people, the local economy together. So when I then did, and I kind of did that naturally. So when I moved into the wider management consulting world with Business Link, I then was able to work at a level where I had influence from an institutional, so the systems working really came in there. So I worked with North London Tech and Business Link, and I was able to lead on a program called the Synergy Project, which at the time, it's one of the largest projects on community economic development. And so that's where I kind of then honed my thinking in the importance of universities and the local communities, the local business communities, and the role of learning and entrepreneurship through that program, so we were able to produce a good model.
Just before you go on to talk about your consultancy and the work, what was it that, because from what you've said, all of the actions which you've taken seem to be around a holistic approach to development. It wasn't that you develop one aspect and you let the other aspect. It seems as though everything was connected in the way that, so where did you get that kind of like understanding to say, you know, we need to connect up things?
Yeah, and that's a good question, because I dubbed it cultural synergy.
Right. Okay.
And I think I've always just had this. I think it probably goes back to football, because in the team, well, when I was 12 years old, the secondary school I went to, Sestrium,
right.
In the first year when we were 12, we went through the whole season and never lost a game.
Okay.
And that's
Invincibles.
And that's the only time in my life I've been in any football team that went the whole season, and you still see 0 lost at the end of the season. And it's never happened again. You know, that's why I still remember it, 12 years old. Right? And on reflection, I look back to all the different skills that were in the team. And for years, we could name every player in the team, you know, right into our 20s and 30s when we used to. Can't really do it now, one or two. But so in my mind, there's always been this thing about working together systematically. So maybe I had a kind of God-given skills of understanding systems, how it's so important that they work together. And that's why I naturally was I feel also I was good at marketing, because I went into selling before I got into marketing.
Mm-hmm.
And I found it very easy to have in my mind all these different brands
Mm-hmm.
and where they kind of stood on the shelf. So I could go into a shop like Boots.
Mm-hmm.
I helped open up the accounts for the selling of Afro hair products in Boots.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to also be responsible for the Selfridges account.
Mm-hmm.
So and I worked with a very experienced merchandiser.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of learned it from him, so he could visualize the whole shelf
Mm-hmm.
in terms of the products and the the
Mm-hmm.
faster selling ones, and it all works together. And if you're going to merchandise, and I guess any merchandiser will tell you, it's that overall look. So I've always seen things from a system working perspective, and all my work since then has been in that holistic system. So,
Brilliant.
and it's just been refined over time through experience, learned experience,
Mm-hmm.
and having to solve problems. Because if you're saying like myself, in terms of my role is to come up with a solution,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and then explain to everyone how we're going to get there,
Right.
and be able to explain why that particular solution
Is
it
is
will work.
operational.
Yeah,
It's going to work.
will work,
Yeah.
because where they are now is not working.
Right.
And what happens a lot of times in a situation where things are not working, everybody has their own ideas
Mm-hmm.
without any sense of, you need to reach a consensus.
Mm-hmm.
You need to decide what the strategic
Mm-hmm.
priorities are, work out and be clear what the key actions are that can be
Mm-hmm.
translated into a workable plan.
Fantastic. So to me, you've positioned yourself as almost like, not almost, a visionary,
Yeah.
being able to gather information, network, identify. I like your analogy of when you said you went into the shop,
Yeah.
and you could look on the shelf and you can position everything in the context of which brand, who's, and all of the background knowledge, and then you could apply your sales pitch. It sounds very similar in that sense is what you do when you go into an organization. How do you gather the information so that you can come up with a robust solution?
Yeah. And the way I've developed in the NHS, where I've honed that, and won what quite wide acclaim and awards, NHS Leadership Award in London, 2014, for I was part of the team called Midwifery Futures.
Mm-hmm.
And I use a simple term. So normally when I'm called in, it's when things are bad. Right? Things are bad. Right. So I have this simple line: all voices must be heard.
Right.
Simple as that.
Mm-hmm.
All voices must be heard. So in any of our institutions today, and post the situation that we're in now, the only way that the institutions will, not the only way, but one of the most effective way in terms of improving representation, will be all voices must be heard.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you do that, then to understand, what does that mean from a system point of view?
Right.
What does it mean for the system goals? What does it mean for personal and professional development? What does it mean for leadership? Because when you're in these sort of crisis situations like now, what happens, like COVID, it uncovers fragmentation.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it can leave people in place who, because they haven't had the experience of dealing with a crisis, they're not clear what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll have teams turning in on each other because they don't know what to do either.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no clear pathway for their voice to be heard,
Mm-hmm.
to actually understand, and that knowledge sharing to go across, so you can get a sense of, as I said, so what are the strategic priorities and where we are? Because there's lots of priorities.
Yeah.
But unless you're clear, you're not going to get out your current situation.
Yeah.
And you're certainly not going to achieve any outcomes.
Yeah.
And resources are very tight, both personal, financial, and maybe you've got customers and people and clients and patients to serve. So there's a demand and expectation, a public expectation, because we need the public to have trust and confidence in the system. So it's that type of thinking. And then values. And as I say, values are the common ground for all of us, regardless of our background and status. So even if I'm involved in a situation where there's been racial discrimination and exclusion, I say, well, we still have to get back to the values. What are the values of this organization, the team? You know, who are you serving? You know, at the end of the day, it's still values based. And that's important. Otherwise, you're not going to get that consensus. You're not going to get the transformation within the team. And you're certainly not going to achieve the goals. You just get continual confusion and disagreement.
So tell, because I'm just looking at the chat and I've just seen that Sunday, your good friend Sunday, I haven't primed him. He just put it in there because he always does, right? Yeah. And right, I'm sure he's going to get back at me afterwards. But he's put in that you and Christina Yates, Imperial as One wouldn't be here had it not been for your intervention. So can you tell us about the situation when you came in and what you guys did, and to help us see how you've applied your systematic strategy, your cultural synergy to Imperial to develop what we class as Imperial as One?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it is an institutional question, Wayne. The reason being, after I made my name, as I said, in the regeneration, I was asked to work at the Royal College of Nursing.
Right.
And it was during the time where institutions were saying, you know, making a public statement around institutional racism. But as we know, which the same thing's happening now with Black Lives Matter, it's okay to release a statement that you care or your institution is something because you're thinking of your reputation. But then how do you then translate that down into the way the system works again? We're back to that two words again, system working, right? What does it mean to staff? What does it mean to, you know, the way you actually do things? So I was asked to work at the Royal College of Nursing to focus on the BME staff. And I have to say this here, Black and minority ethnic, and it doesn't just mean people with black and brown faces. So you can come from Eastern Europe, Australia, New Zealand, and in this country, you're classed as BME. Of course, you do have to look at the population groups, African, Caribbean, Asian, and then break down the groups to work out whether there's fair representation or not. But that's another discussion altogether. But I just wanted to put that up front.
Yeah.
So my role then was to work out institutionally how the RCN itself could be more representative and get more involvement within the institution itself, and then how it could play a more effective role within the NHS, given its role as a professional organisation as well as a union.
Yeah.
So I devised this program called RCN Connect, and I ran workshops in London, Newcastle, Glasgow, Belfast, Mid Wales, and the link between the RCN and the Department of Health. I facilitated that and worked with the senior nursing officer. So at the time, the chief nursing officer was Sarah Manali, who's now actually the Bishop of London. And Nola Ishmael is still very heavily involved in the RCN and motivating young people in the NHS. So we ran sort of roadshows around the country, and then I became the facilitator of most of the staff networks, the BME staff networks. So the NHS introduced a overall program called Improving Working Lives, and then specifically for diversity, a program called Positively Diverse. And basically that allowed time for staff to get together and have these networks around self-development and just an expression of how they felt. So I facilitated most of those around the time. And then I was then appointed as an independent appointments assessor for the Appointments Commission. So at the time it was called the NHS Appointments Commission. Based on that work, and in that role, I was involved in the most senior appointments panels for the people who run the NHS system. You know, the NMC, advisory groups, chairman of boards, non-executive directors, and things like that. So, and it was with that background that Christine selected me to work with Imperial. So originally I worked some sort of some of your local staff in terms of equality, and then a couple of years later she called me back and said, would I be interested in working with the setting up as Imperial as one. But to take you back, the foundation of it at the time, Imperial had a survey out, and the theme was, is Imperial a good place to work? And the response from that, I think, probably surprised the institution in terms of how the BME staff felt.
Right.
And so the model that I recommended for Imperial, so when I looked at Imperial and its background, I felt that Imperial should, given its reputation, should have a high level approach similar to what the RCN did in terms of the way it went about it. And so the advisory group model, which I started to favor rather than a network, because before the end of the RCN Connect program, I realized it was better for people to work in communities of practice.
Right.
And having that background, the business link background,
Mm-hmm.
knowing about, you know, clusters and the importance of sectorizing businesses and
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneurs and SMEs,
mm-hmm.
because they can share knowledge amongst themselves.
Yeah.
So then I started to recommend to all of the NHS clients, go with an advisory group model, because you can then look at, you know, individual development, professional development, but most importantly, it's important that these groups don't just think of themselves and their own professional development, but they have to think about the communities from where they've come from. So with the RCN, we had nurses, midwives, and other medical staff actually going and speaking in schools, because I said it's important as a profession that you engage with the community.
Yeah.
Because you're all drawn from the very same community. So if we want the institution to be representational, and that's about personal ambition as well as improving things, then those same individuals should be serving the community, particularly those communities where there's disadvantage. And that's what brought about Creative Futures as well, that same thinking that I brought to Imperial. Because I felt when I was in Imperial, august institution as it is, but I felt, well, all these staff, I appreciate that they're ambitious and they want improvement, but also they should have a role to play.
They should be giving back.
An impactful role in the community, particularly in those areas like Brent and Lewisham and those kind of areas. And the young people should be given the opportunity to come and feel what it's like to be in a world-class institution. They may not come to Imperial, but that's not the point. It's about inspiring them. And then, so Christine, and then was really behind that. And we kind of made sure within the infrastructure that they understood why that was the important part of Imperial's development. And then good fortune, even though Sunday sat right at the back at the launch, the first meeting, right at the back, right? I didn't even see him come to think of it. It's only I said, oh, you were there. So he can evidence he was there because I've got the original picture. But he rose to the top, going back to that team working and people understanding that this was important. And of course, look at the things that Sunday's done since. Yeah. Being a shining example of what to do. Use your professional, but there's some personal values. It's got nothing to do with your professional skills. It's personal values that you want to help others without expecting anything in return.
Yeah. So I like the points which you made there with regards to moving it just from being almost like a self-help group.
Exactly.
Right. To a group which helps others by providing the advice. collating the information and then transmitting solutions. If I've got
Yeah,
your
yeah, and within that, and that's a good point. There's the importance of self and professional development.
right.
So if I bring that forward today, so Imperial was also about, okay, so what are your goals? And one of the things that we did was unique as well. I said, again, having that background, that senior appointments background, I said, well, what we need to do as well with Imperial BME staff, we need to get mentors from the same BME background from other institutions where they've reached the senior level. So we've got people from other people from the BBC, from the police, and from the NHS. So again, they had reached that non-executive senior level sort of position, and then sort of, you know, match them together.
Yeah.
Because it's the thinking, because one of the challenges that people have all the time is that, as you know, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
And if you're going to go into different domains, you have to know. So you have to have come from a mentored group. Some people don't think that they need to because they don't know what they don't know.
Yeah.
So when they go into certain domains, they wonder why they're not making their way and other people are.
Yeah.
And mentoring and coaching is open to all. But it just, again, it depends on yourself as an individual. So if I was to give you a quick example in terms of NHS now, going back to that, and I made the point about all voices must be heard. There's a process that you have to go through to actually understand in terms of when you're doing service investigations or examinations. So what I do, I have one-to-one confidential discussions with everybody who I need to or supposed to. The first question I ask people is, what action needs to be taken to improve your well-being at this trust or organisation? It may be in the NHS at this trust. What are your ideas for quality and service improvement that will improve the patient experience, access and involvement? And do you understand your role and what the organisation expects from you? And normally when you speak to enough people, you'll get a consistent picture of what's really going on. It's the same as almost doing a pulse check when you're doing And then so inherent within that then is I'm asking people, okay, so what are your ideas for improving things? What type of person are you as well? You may be complaining and the environment might not be great, but what ideas do you have then? Maybe you're somebody who should be given an opportunity to lead on something. Because again, a lot of time people don't realize that when you get to certain levels, it's important that you can describe very clearly what you have done. As opposed to, you know, what you would like to do. And that proven track record is really important.
That's really interesting. I do like the idea about you're developing not just the individual, you're developing a community spirit, and you're doing it by your model does it by empowering people, and once they become empowered, they empower others. Is that
well, virtually. So what I say then, my role is to enable you.
Right. Okay.
Right. You empower yourself within.
Fine.
Empowerment comes when you are able to make your way through within that institution. Because it's not about just having a face or just being there and being at the table and not helping with the transformation.
No. Whoa. Right. I want to ask one final question, really, before I open it up to the audience, to everyone. Time has gone so quickly. Taking into consideration, you were here some 15 years ago. You helped to establish Imperial as one. We now have a situation with the Black Lives Matter movement, the COVID-19. What would you do at this particular point if you were going back to your normal questions? What questions would you be now throwing out to an organization about this situation?
I would be saying, I go back to, right. So first of all, we say COVID and the current situation that we are in has uncovered the fragmentation within institutions.
Right.
All institutions have to reset the way they deliver learning and deliver what we call the 21st century skills. But also applied to that now, we have to probably deliver some kind of lifelong skills as well for people as well. So we're now talking about lifelong 21st century skills. So I would go back to this point of all voices must be heard. And as I said before about representation. So we've got to look at inclusion, representation, responsibility, and accountability by data. That's really important. Let's look at the data.
Accountability by data. Go ahead.
And then, and what we mean that by that, again, learned in the NHS, is that it's pointless arguing about the lack of representation in terms of how we got here, but we are where we are. And this is what the data says. Right. So going back to my first point, so what we have to do now is work out how are we going to progress? So progression. Set some goals for the next 2 years, come up with the strategic priorities, the key actions, and translate that into a workable plan that serves, you know, whoever we're supposed to be, our beneficiaries, whoever they may be. And that's the situation that we are now. So institutionally, so even though there's a lot of institutions who've put out, well-considered press releases and made announcements, they still need to improve the representation. Right. They will have to listen to all voices. But at some point they'll get to that, those who feel that maybe they don't need to do that, but they will get there.
Yeah. Fantastic. I can see a couple of questions, so I'm going to open up, and then I've got another couple of questions afterwards. But I believe Connie, is it Connie? Sunday, you've already just put your camera on. He's not even waiting for me to invite him on.
Good day, young man.
Sunday, go ahead, and then Connie, sorry.
Right. Thank you very much. I nearly missed this meeting this morning, but it was my diary and alarm came on. I said, wow, Rudy, I have to listen to this. As Rudy said, without Rudy and Christine, we won't be where we are today. Yeah. But one question I want to put to Rudy, thank you very much. You've really inspired me. Some of the things I've picked up in the last 15 years, without you, talking to me and encouraging me, I'm sure I wouldn't have done that. I would have focused on other things. One thing I want to ask you, I think you've answered partly, but I want to challenge you here. If you had the opportunity to be the president of Imperial College for 1 week, just 1 week alone, and Imperial College have made some very radical move in the last few weeks in terms of Black Lives Matter, slavery. What one thing will you do in that 1 week to really make a statement out there that Imperial College do care?
A statement of intent.
Yeah.
So it would be that all voices must be heard. But prior to that, there would be that absolute commitment that it would be translated into plans that will be delivered, that align with the institution itself and its focus and goals. And it would be based on talent. And if we go back to the original Imperial as one model, it was based on talent. And that's in its heyday is because we had talent from all the different backgrounds. So in regeneration 20 years ago, what we used to say was that if you think of a neighborhood where you've got all these different communities, all you have to do is get the most talented people from each community and ensure that they understand how best to serve their community, and you get some vibrancy. And it's the same thinking I brought to Imperial. And as you know, even the term Imperial as one, which again I've transferred into the NHS, came out of Imperial, having so much talent from different people. And then somebody said, why don't we say as one? So again, breaking down the barriers And we're back to that teamwork again, Wayne, that Manchester United have displayed so for many decades, you know. It's that, again, but teamwork only works when there's high-level individual performance.
Yeah.
And this is the point we're trying to get. Yes, we want the most talented people, but the system works because of the team. And we always say harmony is the foundation of all institutions. So again, in answer to your question, Sunday, it's that all voices must be heard. It's that harmony within the system, because otherwise it's not going to work, because you get people upset, distracted, and you won't get the engagement. You can have all the announcements, all the slip videos, but if you haven't said all voices must be heard, and then people have a belief that there is going to be the transformation. Because by and large, from a system point of view, where there's underrepresentation and where things are not fair, it's well known. There's lots of people who know from all backgrounds who know things aren't fair. So, and that's why we get back to the question of values, Wayne. Values being the common ground for all of us, regardless of our background or status.
Yeah.
And again, and I'm always saying to people, we have to remember in this country now, 1 in 10 people are married to somebody of a different culture.
Yeah.
So again, so you can't just look at people and say, well, you wouldn't understand.
Yeah.
Could you, not that you don't know their story as well. And this is why I hear in the voices and asking people how they feel. And so, okay, so what are your ideas for improvement? Because again, I've seen it in some of the work I've done in the NHS, some of the greatest insights have come from people in the administrative positions, as opposed to the chair or the chief executive who's a cheerleader who doesn't really know what's going on in the system.
Yeah.
And that accountability by data, you know, let's start with the data, is really important as well.
Yeah.
And thinking about progression. So it's not rocket science, really.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Thank you very much, Rudy. That reinforced my point, my famous quote, that if you want to work together. So that.
Fantastic. You Sunday, your unfortunately your thing's going. Your internet's a bit slow today. Right. So I'm gonna jump to Connie. Well, I'll come back. Type it in the chat.
What I was saying there, Rudy just highlighted there.
All right. I'm gonna go to Connie. It is Connie.
Hello, I'm really sorry. I just have to go to a meeting. I will catch up with the recording afterwards, but thank you very much, Rudy, for your very helpful insight.
Okay.
Thank you.
The question Connie was asking about was...
Thank you.
Bye-bye, Connie. Thank you. Was when you establish programs with that target specific communities, how do you ensure that you get the right support and it's not just for lip service, the optics that they are doing something? How do you get the buy-in?
Yeah, and in the sense, when I'm brought in, that's when things are really bad. Basically, I always kind of say, when there's a fire, when they tend to bring me in. So it's a good question. Things are so bad anyway, and the disruption is having an impact on the institution itself, because a lot of the time our institutions will tolerate a level of unfairness and underrepresentation until there's some kind of, what we'd say, public outrage, or there's some incidents, or new individuals come in and say, well, actually, this is not right, and there has to be a change, and they're determined to lead the transformation. But of course, you need subject matter expertise to, you know, to understand how to do it, because you do have to have done it before to know what to do.
So effectively, in answering that question, you're saying, well, part of it is being able to have the right people in place who can come up with reasonable and logical solutions. So just having just anybody wouldn't help to get that buy-in to the system.
No, because otherwise, if it was that easy, it would be done, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I think
Mm-hmm.
that's why there is a breakdown in the system.
Mm-hmm.
And lots of times organizations will say, right, you know, we're putting on a seminar, or we're putting on a listening event, you know, crowd everybody into one big room, and
Mm-hmm.
and there's just it's just announcements, and everybody walks away knowing very well, and they know who've presented it, that nothing's going to change from a system point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And the institution, again, the disharmony hasn't really been highlighted, and you haven't really identified really where is the disruption.
Yeah.
And then the disruption, and you know, has to be challenged, and people to understand what that means to the organization. So that is definitely a leadership situation.
Right. So
and that's what it made Imperial one really originally. Was the rector at the time. He determined, Richard Sykes, there was a determination that this group, and it was going to be based on talent, and there wasn't going to be any management excuse for this initiative not to work.
So you had direct, clear leadership from the very top of the organization. I think that's probably why Sunday was asking his question as well, about if you were president for the day or for a week, what would you do?
Yeah. And it was because of that. That was a determined presentation, and at the time he made it clear to the managers who were there and to the system. And then the accountability was there, and of course with Christine, because we went to a lot of other meetings, and the HR director at the time and the deputy HR director, so there was a lot of system influences involved. Otherwise it doesn't work. It's just an announcement, because the areas are just too big, and the announcement don't go anywhere. You know.
Right, I've got another question here from TK. So TK, if you'd like to ask your question, please. Or do you want me to ask it? All right.
He needs to unmute himself.
TK, can you unmute yourself? I've lost TK.
Yeah, let's put something on the chat.
All right. So TK's question was, I remember mentoring being discussed with the speaker, Dr. Acker, last week. How can we achieve a balance of acting as a representative mentor for the mentee, right? But also involving white allies as mentors to help induce systematic change and dismantle barriers in the system?
Yeah, I think my point was, you know, when I said values are the common ground for all of us, regardless of our background and state, that's exactly what it means. Because Imperial's one worked because there were many different people with different backgrounds involved. You know, other parts, HR people, and other parts of the system, you know, Christine, we all had different backgrounds. Sunday, we have different backgrounds. So I don't think it's necessarily always saying that you've got to identify by somebody's racial background on the basis of values. It's a values issue, regardless of background and status. And we're talking about representation again. So I guess you're balancing all these things. Representation is important, values are important, people from different backgrounds, and cultural understanding is essential. So that's why you need people from all different backgrounds and experience for culture.
I'm going to challenge you a little bit here then. Absolutely. Because I understand what you're saying about values, but what then happens if you've got people with different value systems? You see,
and we get back to the consensus, and again, you may have different value systems, right? But if you're going to reach if you've got a goal, whatever that might be, you have to reach a consensus in order that you can come up with strategic priorities, key actions, and translate that into workable plans. Otherwise, you end up just have circular discussions, and which of course is a waste of organizational resources.
Yeah.
And you're not going to meet the goals, which means somebody needs to be held to account for that.
Fair enough. Listen, time has gone so quickly. We're already at 15:15, right? So I'm going to just ask you my final question. And that question is, what advice would you have given to your younger self? Starting out, what advice would you have given them?
Listen. Listen before acting.
Right.
Listening is important. Definitely that. One thing I forgot as well, which we pioneered it, Imperial as one, was the knowledge sharing seminars. So the original knowledge sharing seminars, which were cross-institutional, and we've carried on doing those into the NHS and beyond, the international developments. And so the approach to the knowledge sharing, you know, we brought that in after Creative Futures. And I know you did a couple of things were done after that, because I thought it was important for that good practice knowledge sharing across institutions.
And that feeds into the notion which you mentioned earlier on, which was about cultural synergy.
Yeah.
Because when you share knowledge, you can develop a cultural identity within an identity. Yeah. So, and then you can share those common values because you're saying this is what we represent.
Yeah, because again, there's a system goal.
Yeah.
So Imperial, you know, deliver world-class education, you know, startups, all the things that Imperial does.
Yeah.
And it achieves the best through that cultural synergy, that knowledge sharing, that the good practice, etc., ideas, you know, the whole intellectual capital, all that kind of thing.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Rudy, I'm going to say a big thank you for taking the time to discuss this with us this morning, or this afternoon. It's been a really fruitful discussion. The thing which I am going to take away, or one of the messages, which all voices must be heard. If we can take that away, it's a good way of us starting to develop strategies for moving forward, for developing proper, effective action plans.
Yeah, and
hearing the people's voices.
Exactly, but most important as well, with Imperial, you've already got a track record. You've already got a proven track record of achievement. The challenge for this generation now is, how do you make progression from where we are now, from what's being done? And if people are humble enough to go back and look at the source and how it was done originally, then you can then think about, where do we go from here within the context of the time that we're in now? And that's the type of thinking that needs to be applied in terms of progression, because at the end of the day, it's always about progression.
Brilliant, thank you. Right, I'm going to just quickly share the screen and let everybody know what's happening next week. Thank you again, Rudy. Next week, we're going to be having Paul Brown, MBE, and he will be discussing his 30 years at Imperial College. 30 years, can you believe it? Right? Well done, Paul, definitely. And another thing just to highlight is that we do actually, all of the Belonging series is available on YouTube. So this will also be one of them, which will be uploaded onto YouTube for you to be able to refer and send to other people, so that they can also hear and see what it means to belong and to experience, explore the BAME experience together. So I'd like to just say a big thank you once again for everyone who's come, and thank Rudy for being our guest this week, and have a good week, everyone.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye-bye. Right, let me just stop this.